other, try to shove ourselves back together. We was making love, making love. It was a cold, dark evening, such a long time ago, when by the mighty hand of Joe, it was a sad story how we became lonely two-legged creatures. A story, the origin of love, that's the origin of love.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cult Musical Zone, Episode 4. Today, we're going to talk about the legendary and groundbreaking cult musical, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. And we have two guests who are on our other podcast, but we also have a new guest today. So I am going to, other podcast episodes, but I am going to let them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about why they're here. Allie?
Hi, I'm Allie from from RHPS Buffalo. I just came back from RKO Con where I played Hedwig in a shadow cast of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. So I am a shadow cast performer. You can find me on TikTok, Allie and Drag, or you can find me on Instagram at Allie Von Chico. And I am here because I am just a massive Hedwig fan. And James and I have chatted about this musical a couple of times, so tonight's going to be a lot of fun.
Hi, Harry?
Hi, I'm Harriet. Most people call me Harry. I'm from the UK, and I'm here because, again, I am in love with Hedwig, with the songs, the characters, the fashion, everything to do with it. I've been cosplaying for about 4 or 5 years now, which is crazy. And I recently did cosplay of Hedwig that I took to Comic-Con. And I just feel a real connection to the to the musical. Yeah, so that's why I'm here, and I think it's going to be really fun.
And Tyler, tell us about yourself.
Well, hi, I'm Tyler. So I'm also with the Rocky Horror Cast, Nashville's Little Morals. And so we're on Instagram there. You can also find just me, Tyler Henry Actor, all one word, of course. Yeah, I definitely wanted to be a part of this because I just love Hedwig so much. I'll go ahead out the gate and just say I am more familiar with the movie. I don't think I've seen it actually on stage. I've seen recordings of it on stage, but definitely the movie was what got me into it. The movie itself I have it listed in my top 30 or 35 favorite films of all time. I don't know, some sort of weird specific number on my letterboxd there, but watching it again today during dead time at work, I had it on my phone. It's just absolutely amazing. And then to have that music and as you've already said, James, I mean, it's groundbreaking for especially for the time that it came out. I think it opened the door for a lot. So maybe we'll get into that. But yeah, that's my little introductory spiel there.
Okay, so the first question is let's talk about our first time. Our first times? No. Our first time seeing Hedwig. My introduction to Hedwig was on rockymusic.org, which is a Rocky Horror Picture Show blog that talks about Rocky Horror music and shock treatment. And the first time, that's how I found out about Hedwig, and it was and I was sort of raised very conservative, so I couldn't buy Hedwig and get it sent in the mail. So I ended up finding Hedwig on VHS at a truck stop, funny enough, in Florida. And I snuck it and watched it at home, and it was very groundbreaking for me. I expected to go in for it to be like Rocky Horror. It was compared, I think, on the VHS or DVD cover as like Rent meets Rocky Horror. But I think it's in a league of its own. I think it's much more grounded in reality, which makes it so much more powerful. But yeah, and anyone can go next and talk about their first time. But yeah, mine was through Rocky Horror, really. And anybody can go next. Allie?
Nobody wants to ever go. Like, nobody wants to be like, me, I'll go. So, I was in college, and what you need to understand is back in the late 20th century, when I was finishing college, Jonathan Larson had just passed kind of recently. And so this was the same time I was getting into Tick Tick Boom. A friend of mine got an off-Broadway bootleg cast recording of Hedwig. And he's like, Allie, you got to hear this. And we passed it around my college suite. And so I got into it by hearing it and just falling in love with the liner notes that I could get my hands on in the grubby, dingy early days of the internet. And when the movie opened, it played in Buffalo, and I went to see it, and I was just gobsmacked, just drawn in by this beautiful story and the dream sequences and musical numbers, and it was like Rocky. I was just starting my baby shadow casting journey, so I was fresh into Rocky troupe, and I can see where the similarities drawn between the musical numbers and the fantastic costumes and the gender bending sexuality. But that's about where the similarities end, I think. And I can see the connection between Rent, because singer-songwriter also starring in it. You know, it had the same season of Broadway musical under its belt, the same kind of tonal sound. But yeah, I've just been in love from the jump. Can't get enough of it. And it's in my blood. I'm sitting here in a cape I made, for heaven's sake. This is my life now.
At some point you're gonna have to stand up and, show us at some point if you want to do it now. Okay. Tyler, talk us about the first time you've seen Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So, I mean, we've discussed, I discovered Rocky Horror basically when I was 11, and then my parents tried desperately to keep me away from it. But it was taped off of VH1. It was edited. It's whatever. That's a whole other story. So I heard about it again because of the comparisons that, yeah, were on the DVD art and everything. I still didn't see it for a long time. And I had a friend in high school, and she was really into it. And I think it was a late night. I want to say this was like my senior year of high school, so maybe around like 2008, and it was late night TV, and it was on, I think UPN, if you remember that. I think you remember that was like basic cable. So that in itself was kind of interesting because I kind of knew the gist of the story, about what the Angry Inch was and everything. I think what I remember, it was Wig in a Box. It was that sequence that I saw. And that definitely, I was like, ooh, this is interesting. Like the song, the way it's filmed. But even then, it was still, I don't think it was honestly till after college. Well, I couldn't find a copy. And well, I could have ordered it online, but we had this really cool, like huge used movie book music store here in Nashville. But I think it was I was right out of college, so that would have been like 2012 or so. And they finally had the DVD, and they had it like super expensive, at least compared to what everything else they had. But I got it because I'm like, I have to watch this. And so I would say I was maybe like 22 or so when I watched it, so I was kind of late to this one. But and I had never seen it on stage. I'd never seen any recordings of it on stage. I didn't really know the music, so I really went into this completely blind. And I just absolutely loved it. And it was just so, and again, watching it today, it's so heartbreaking and it's so sad. And the film makes it even more so. But the cinematography also, there are some shots in here that are just gorgeous. And the way that John Cameron Mitchell, I mean, because of course he directed it, so it's just, I'm always blown away when I go back and watch it. Like, wow, I mean, they didn't just make just a great like adaptation of a musical. They made a great film that I consider a drama, kind of a comedy, but happens to be a musical as well. So that was kind of that was my experience, and I was a fan of it, and I didn't get really, really into it. I don't know why I was such a late bloomer with this, but I kind of was. So unfortunately, like I said, that's kind of been my only experience with it. I will. I hope he doesn't watch this. I'm not going to name drop. But anyway, there was, I am an actor around town. There was a production before things, kind of went to hell. They were doing a production in Nashville. And this is one of my big dream roles to play on stage is Hedwig / Tommy. So I went all out for it. I went to this audition. I belted out the end of David Bowie's Rock and Roll Suicide and threw in some Lift Up Your Hands at the end because I was connecting. I wanted, to know how smart I was connecting, these influences. And I made callbacks, and there was like 2 other guys, and I didn't get it. And I normally am fine if I don't book a role. I get over it. I was so depressed by not getting Hedwig. And luckily, I mean, I don't drink anymore. It's been over 9.5 years, but I destroyed a jar of Nutella when I found out the news. I went to something else, which may not have been better. But yeah, that was. I'm sorry.
This is getting into an episode of Oprah and Dr. Phil.
I know. But anyway, so hopefully one day, I wanted to just say, if any current or future theatrical producers in the Nashville area are watching, please do it again, and please cast me. So I just turned this into something that is totally not supposed to be. So why don't we let Harry go now?
Harry, the first time that I felt like you're the young.
I was actually sorry. Oh, it's quite laggy, so I might cut into people. I'm sorry. I was actually really enjoying that, Tyler. I suppose I was first introduced to Hedwig. There was this musical station, radio station that I've been listening to since I was like 11, maybe. It's called Magic at the Musical. It used to be called something else. I used to be a Saturday theatre kid and listen to it to go to sleep. And a song, it started slow, it went into this like wild medley. It had upbeat, it had ballad. It was amazing, and I was confused by it but intrigued. And every night when I'd hear sort of 2 seconds of silence and then a piano chord, I'd be like, it's the song again. Song I have no idea anything about. So one day I thought I'll look up the lyrics because I had no idea what it was even called. It came up Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which was not something I was expecting. The only thing I'd ever heard before about Hedwig and the Angry Inch was that it was like similar to Rocky Horror. That was the only thing I'd heard, and that made me very apprehensive because I have seen Rocky Horror and I did really enjoy it, but it was with one of those exes that you just don't speak about. Like, it's that bad. Like, it's a bad word in your house to say their name. So like you just don't talk about it. So I was very apprehensive because I was like, oh, this might bring things back. So I sat with my mum in the lounge. We downloaded it on the TV and we watched it, and I was sort of gobsmacked by the ending, how open it was, and like how I was like, what? I was so confused, but also happy, but also sad, and I didn't know what was going on. I had to watch it about 3 times just to like fully comprehend what I'd just seen. But I was so like thrilled with it. The soundtrack started being on repeat on Spotify. It was the only thing I listened to. I think my Spotify came back for the Wrapped thing on your Christmas, and it was like, you've listened to Wig in a Box 262 times in the past 5 months. And I was like, okay. Seems legit. Ever since then, I'm the same. I haven't actually seen it on stage. I've seen the recording with John Cameron Mitchell, with Neil Patrick Harris. I was gonna go and see with my mum down to Leeds, the Davina de Campo being in Hedwig. I was really excited about that, but we never got around to it because it's quite a while away, and I really wanted to go and see that, but still, like, the stage version from what I saw was absolutely incredible. Obviously you've got all the songs from the stage in the film, but there's also some extra songs, like The Long Grift, for example, which is it slightly features in the film, but it's one of my favorites. Like, just an incredible experience, and I'm glad that I found out about it in the way of Wig in a Box. I thought that was really fun.
Yeah. which leads into the plot. And the plot, I think, is pretty straightforward in the musical because it's basically a one-woman show. Whereas the movie is quite confusing. And so I think it takes, kind of like Shock Treatment, it takes a few viewings to kind of understand what's going on. When I watched it recently, I caught some of the jokes and the references that I hadn't got before. But then again, I was like 13 when I saw it. So let's talk just our reactions about the plot. Not getting too much in depth because we can save that. But what are your reactions to the whole story of this gender? I don't know if Hedwig exists in the binary. I think Hedwig exists outside of the binary, which Allie and I were speaking about. It's not a happy story. It's not a happy story. We can talk about if there is a redemption arc in the end. But basically someone who escapes a life of communism and a life of despair to live where music's their only muse, and then do they find happiness or does it get worse for Hedwig? Or Hansel or both? So what was your reactions? The music's wonderful, but what is your reaction to the plot? If there was no music in this particular film and it was just this plot, the story, what do you make of this story and this complicated plot? Who wants to go first? Allie?
I think that if there was no music, this movie would be even more tragic and even more heartbreaking. I think the breaks from reality, like the finale of Wig in a Box, or those moments where you're very clearly not entirely in reality anymore, like Wicked Little Town reprise with Hedwig and Tommy in the empty concert hall. You're very clearly not in reality, but it's important to the development of the characters that you see these pieces. So I think without the music, it would just be a tragic, sad, oh God, all near unbearable heartbreak. And I think it's the music that makes it, redeems it from just being so tragic.
I'll sort of ask you before we move on to Tyler. Tyler, raise your hand. Do you think that there is redemption at all? Do you think there's like a redemption arc for Hansel / Hedwig?
So I think that my first watch was like, oh, so he's looking for himself in others. She's looking for herself in others. But with my most current rewatch, like I said, it's almost like Hedwig found themselves in themselves. And I realize I'm coming at this 20 some odd years and a whole gender different than when I first saw the film. So I have a whole different breadth of experience, but I think it's about finding yourself in what you have to work with.
Yeah, that's deep. But it's a very deep film. It's complex. Tyler?
Yeah, that's what she has to work with, But no, the first thing I just had, that's brilliantly what Allie just said. The music, that's that's an escape for Hedwig, like it is for us, because yeah, that's from this tragic reality. So yeah, that was, I think, my thing with it. I had been confused really by the ending for many years. I mean, most of the film, like you said, is pretty straightforward. You understand the flashbacks, you understand what's more of a dream sequence or stylized or however you want to say it. But yeah, I remember the first time, I mean, that I sat and watched the whole thing. The ending, I just really couldn't figure it out, and I think that's part of where it gets a little bit confusing. Which, of course, I mean, I guess, for the film, it makes sense that they had to have another actor play Tommy. I think, and then maybe I got it more again when I watched. I mean, it's on YouTube, and it's with John Cameron Mitchell. I think it's when they're off Broadway, like 98 or so. Then it kind of made more sense to me, and I was really really trying to focus on that earlier today, watching it again. And then what I took from the ending is, Hedwig / Hansel kept giving both physically and emotionally all these pieces of herself to everyone in her life. And I think, stripping off the garb during Exquisite Corpse, I mean, that was just shedding the skin almost, and then confronting Tommy, which is the Hansel part in essence. Well, no, that's not the Hansel. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So basically, that whole feud. And then what always really confused me is then all of a sudden we're back at the Bilgewater, that's right, in Times Square. It's all white and all the band's dressed in white. So then you're like, oh, did she die? I don't know. I mean, it's kind of odd. But then I got it. It's just like now Hansel can just be his or their self, whatever it is now, just because, he's barely got any clothes on. So, and then of course the Silver Cross again. So I kind of got it a little bit more this time. And with that, it made the ending maybe a little bit happier to me from this total Greek tragedy almost. Like, I think that's the saddest thing of all is when, she gets to Junction City, Luther just leaves, and it's like not even a year later. And then you see the Berlin Wall is finally coming down. And then there's that in the movie, it is so perfect. And I heard it again today. The newscaster says, the Germans are a patient people. Good things come to those who wait. And you're just like, oh my God, he just wanted to get out, So maybe I think there is redemption because then going there, she was Hedwig. That was kind of a persona. She had to hide behind that, even performing as we see through the songs in the film, and then finally able to strip that off. It's just whether it's Hedwig or Hansel, that's who they are, and they're there.
Save that because John
Okay.
Cameron actually did a very contentious interview that Allie and I were talking.
Oh, okay.
He said,
I'm glad you corrected me. Yeah.
Because I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm going to talk about that. We'll get into that. It's a very complex.
Well, I didn't see that, but that makes total sense too. And
So
so then for me, that makes it more of a redemption. Yeah, at the end.
Oh, well, just wait, because I'm going to ask you.
Or
Okay.
not. We'll see, I guess. Okay.
Or Harry?
Well, I suppose the plot in itself, like with or without music, but especially without music, is very shocking almost. Like going into it, I don't know what I expected when I read the title Angry Inch, but I wasn't really expecting what I saw. And it wasn't like that I was grossed out. It wasn't that I was disgusted. I was just like really intrigued. I didn't really think, I'd never seen anything like this. You see gory things or you see sexual things, but you never see something quite like this. It's very unique in that way. And it's also very controversial in a way because you spend sort of a lot of the film thinking, is Hedwig happy being Hedwig? Is Hedwig just sort of conforming? Is Hedwig doing this because she has to? It's like, and then it goes on, and it goes up and down like that. Obviously, wig in a box, it's like, I'm happy with who I am. I want to be who I am. And then it goes up and down and up and down. And the ending, I suppose it is almost a redemption. As you say, a whole being completely stripped bare, no wig, no makeup, no clothes, just purely being yourself. And of course, the image of the tattoo now not being two halves, but being one whole, sort of indicating that you don't have to be with someone else to be whole yourself, which is a very, like quite a deep message. And then they just walk off into the distance. And it's almost like a rebirth. It's like a new beginning. It's really, really interesting to watch. But yeah, I'd say the plot in itself, very tragic, very unique, and probably very relatable to a lot of people. Like almost everyone who watches the film can relate in some way to one of the characters, most likely Hedwig, whether that is because of, you know, gender identity, whether that is just because of mental health, because of anything, you can relate to the character in some way or another, which is, you know, one reason why I thought the plot was incredibly interesting. It's not afraid to show the flaws of the main character. Hedwig is incredibly flawed throughout the film, but you still do root for them, and you're happy at the end to see that they're almost being let free of what restrained them in the past, which I really liked about the film.
Yeah, I thought about that. I don't know if Hedwig is flawed, but I think they're a creature of their environment. I mean, the way that they're treated by certain characters, and you know, how they're treated by Luther, how they're treated by their mother, then how they treat Yitzhak, then in turn how Tommy treats Hedwig. I mean, I think it just shows that hurt people hurt people. I think that's the whole. I don't think any of them really know how to treat one another. And it's complicated. It's complicated. So the next question's quite just straightforward. If you had to pick two favorite, and it's so hard because the soundtrack's so beautiful. If you could only choose two songs to be defining songs I know it's horrible. Okay, three. If there was three defining songs that you're like, these three stick out more than any, I think mine would have to be The Origin of Love, of course, because it's such a gorgeous song that's, you know, just so emotive and powerful. I really like Wicked Little Town and Wig in a Box. The only three that you can, and it's a gorgeous soundtrack, but there's only three that you could like pick that you think define what Hedwig is, the story and the person. Harry, you want to go first?
Oh, you put me on a tricky one. I'm gonna have to say, I'm not gonna say we're gonna box purely because you said it. It's a song that people think of when they think of Hedwig, and it's absolutely one of the most defining songs. But I have to put it aside for now because it would be. But I'm gonna have to say Midnight Radio, because obviously it's absolutely iconic. It's got a lot of sort of reference to David Bowie, which my mum pointed out, and I was like, you know what, yeah. And I'm gonna say Angry Inch. I mean, it's just a badass song. It sounds great, but also some of the lyrics are quite tragic. It's quite sad. Well, it's such an upbeat song. And I think my third song is going to have to be Exquisite Corpse. Again, it's a really sort of loud, intense song, and it's the culmination of all that's been building up in the musical. It's one of those ones that's very underrated, but it's just, it's incredible. I adore it, especially Yitzhak's sort of scream in the middle of it. Like, wouldn't have seen that coming. Loved it. So those are my three.
Tyler, you're three. You guys are choosing the most random one. It's great. I mean, if y'all are choosing the most, go ahead.
Well, number one, yeah, because I was trying to think about this earlier. I mean, for me, it does have to be Wig in a Box. I mean, that I think just because that was the very first like little bit I ever saw of it. But you know, in talking about Hedwig having to conform to this role that they're in, I think that says it beautifully about Miss Midnight, Checkout Queen. You know, lines like that. And I just love it because it's genius in that way, because it's so deceptively upbeat. But when you see it in context and you actually listen to the lyrics, it's as tragic as the rest of the story. Number two, it's one of my favorites. Is Sugar Daddy. I love that song. And I don't know how well that, I guess that just describes Luther, that part of the story. I don't know if you could call it super defining for the overall film, but I love it. And I love it in the film. I wish it was longer in the film. We don't really get to hear much of it, but it's just my favorite thing at that restaurant. And it's all the older Jewish people and the car wash. It's just, And so I got a third one. Okay. The third one, which I guess goes back to, when you were asking something to kind of define it, is the first version, or the Hedwig version that we hear of Wicked Little Town. I just think the melody is just absolutely gorgeous. And again, in especially when you see it in the context and being in this little, I don't know, is it a coffee shop? Is it something? But this little, kind of janky place with the Korean army sergeants' wives, which I love that too. Kwang Yi. But it's so beautiful. Again, it's just the writing of Stephen Trask, and I'm trying to remember if John Cameron Mitchell wrote the lyrics or did he just write the book. But no, so Stephen Trask did both music and lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the brilliant music and lyrics of Stephen Trask, But honestly, I mean, just it's genius, and it does take a few times to watch it to really get that. But those would be my three favorites if I had to pick just three.
All right, Allie?
So my three start with Tear Me Down, because that first number is so full frontally offensive. It's like you're sitting there like, okay, it's rock and communist. What? And I think it really sort of sets you up for the fuckery that's about to happen. Sorry, James. Beep. And Midnight Radio is also on my list because Hedwig is such a powerful rock diva that Patty, Tina, Yoko, Aretha, when he lists them, that's the feeling that I get that they're trying to imbue with that music. So I think it absolutely has to be on my list. And the first song I got into was Wicked Little Town. That's what hooked me. That feeling of displacement. And if you're lost, look for me. And I'm already a big Cyndi Lauper fan, so time after time I will look and find you. I mean, I'm already there. So what I felt was very reminiscent of that, and he got me hook, line, and gay sinker with that. Like I was there.
I never saw the connection between Time After Time and Wicked Little Town. By the way, this is R-rated.
Because I'm 87 years old. I'm able to see it all, my son.
This is R-rated. We can drop any word you want to drop. Yeah, I'm surprised none of y'all said The Origin of Love. I guess it's because I'm such a hopeless romantic. I'm just like, I don't know. Like the whole like we're looking for our other half our entire life, and that's why we feel incomplete. Okay, so your favorite characters. If you had to pick a favorite character, I'm sure we all have one that is like the one that we are gravitate towards. Um, this is a question that I actually was raised in my head while you guys were talking. How would you refer to Hedwig then? Would you refer to Hedwig as they, he, she, or is it interchangeable? Um, I think I'm gonna go out of the norm and say yes, Allie. I think I'm gonna go out of the norm and say my favorite character is Miriam Shore's character. Because I love Miriam Shore. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Phyllis as well. But so I think that when I first saw the movie, I would have referred to Hedwig as a she. I think that's where my knowledge was at the time. I'm a completely different gender than the first time I saw the movie, and I view Hedwig differently as such. And I think, in my opinion, today, they're a they, is how I understand gender. And since I won't steal Phyllis from you as the favorite character, I'm gonna go with, this is pulling it out of left field, the drummer. That face, he looks over it in every shot. He's consistently drunk. I love it. That man had better things to do, and it was so obvious. I lived for that performance.
I love how he's just over Hedwig's jokes, especially it's like when people think of big openings, they usually think of me. Okay, Harry.
Again, it's very sort of interchangeable. Sometimes I find myself saying she about Hedwig, sometimes I find myself saying they. I'd say as well, the most probably comfortable one is they, because one of the most beautiful sort of things about the film is the sort of fluidity of Hedwig's or Hansel's gender throughout. There's been a thing about wanting more non-binary actors to play Hedwig, which is great. That would be a really good sort of representation. But Hedwig's gender fluidity is one of the main concepts of the film. So I think, she, they, he, any of them can work, but they is probably the one most suitable. It just makes a lot of sense considering everything that's sort of said throughout. And my favourite character would actually probably have to be Yitzhak, because I felt a lot of sympathy for Yitzhak's character. As much as I'm loving Hedwig, I'm also feeling so sorry for Yitzhak, because there's clearly this sort of divide in their marriage, in their relationship. Obviously in the musical, you get the heartbreaking sort of backstory that Yitzhak was a drag queen, but Hedwig was jealous of the attention and the fame that they were rising to. And I was like, oh my God, because I watched the film first. So Yitzhak kind of sits on the backbench in the film, but you get to see a lot more of him in the musical. And again, it's kind of beautiful that you have a woman playing Yitzhak. It just adds to the gender fuckery of the whole thing, and I love it. It's beautiful. So Yitzhak's probably my favorite character. Yeah.
And Tyler, your favorite character?
Because y'all already kind of stole mine, didn't steal, but you had it first. But anyway, it was, because we get her for the movie, because we don't see her at the stage show. I love Phyllis Stein. I love her because of her loyalty, and she is trying so hard for Hedwig. And filming all the shows, and again with the old Jewish people. That's my favorite part of Sugar Daddy, because you got the guys, and imagine going out to eat. And we love Hedwig, but if I were going out to eat, I don't want to hear a band like singing, coming up to me doing a car wash. Yeah. So, but the way that Phyllis and Phyllis sticks with Hedwig until that devastating betrayal of ripping up Yitzhak's passport, which is so heartbreaking. So I really love, because we all love Hedwig, of course, obviously, as a character, and sympathize with Hedwig. But I don't know, for the movie, I just really, really love Phyllis. Now Hedwig. Now, well, because I obviously did not see that John Cameron Mitchell interview, so I'm gonna go with the creator, and no, but honestly too, that makes total sense that Hedwig would be they, and like Harry was saying, I think that's more comfortable, just because of the gender fluidity, and it's kind of tough because in the story, Hansel did not really choose to become Hedwig, but then had to live.
Tyler, that's the next thing. So
I keep getting ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, they, them, theirs. Yeah.
So there's two observations that I want to talk about before we close with the legacy. Doing research on this, John Cameron Mitchell in The Advocate recently said that he never considered Hedwig to be a trans icon. Of course, John Cameron Mitchell is part of the gay community, the LGBTQIA community. But he said that at the time when Hedwig was released, he never considered Hedwig to be a trans icon because Hansel did not choose to become a woman. It was done out of necessity, and that Hansel never fully felt comfortable being a woman. It was done as a means to escape communism. So that aspect, John Cameron said it was more about someone fleeing communism versus finding themselves, but they happened to find themselves by fleeing communism. And they said that Hedwig helped them discover their own gender. I'm not sure how John Cameron identifies now, but I think they might be genderqueer or non-binary. But it's complicated. So I just wanted to ask your thoughts about, is Hedwig a trans icon? And if so, how? And if not, why not? Or does it matter? It's sort of like Rocky Horror. Rocky Horror is a product of its generation with glam rock cross-dressing. I mean, Kiss, Mick Jagger, David Bowie. So Rocky Horror, I think we as a community, as fan base, have turned Rocky Horror into something that we needed. And I think Richard O'Brien, some of their views are quite contentious. We love them. We love Richard O'Brien. But I think it's, what do you think about that observation of, I see Allie a bit. What do you think of the observation that Hansel did not choose to become a woman, but it was something they had to live with? Harry?
I think obviously since John Cameron Mitchell, I did read that interview I think a few months ago, and I think obviously John Cameron Mitchell essentially created Hedwig. So what they say Hedwig went through, we have to sort of assume Hedwig went through. Films are open to interpretation, but at the end of the day, that is the creator, and that is definitely the plot point where Hansel is, they say, oh, you're going to have to do this if you want to get married to Luther and leave Germany, or East Berlin even. And at the end of the day, if trans people want to see Hedwig as a trans icon, or as someone that they can relate to in any way, someone who they can sort of project their own sort of feelings about gender onto, then that is completely individual. That is up to them, and that can be a really good thing in helping people find themselves. So even if Hedwig isn't in themselves a trans icon, they still promote a lot of iconography to some trans people who have related to the story of Hedwig. So yeah, I think it's individual, definitely.
I agree. And I think, that's why some characters become gay icons and they're not necessarily gay, or some characters become trans icons if they're not necessarily trans, but it doesn't matter. It's like David Bowie's, for all intents and purposes, David Bowie's Jareth and Labyrinth is not gay, but he's so glamorous and camp that and come on, let's be real. We all stare at the bulge. It's something that we can't help. But yes, too. Oh Lord, do you know what apparent? Never mind. We'll get that Labyrinth episode. Apparently, producers were really, really scared about that. They thought it was too distracting. But Allie, what do you think about that? Because we talked about that briefly about not David Bowie's package, but about Hedwig's the contentiousness, that controversy there.
So I think that when the film was released, I think that what made Hedwig a trans icon was just how out loud Hedwig lived. I come from that generation. Queer was a slur. Fag was a slur. Those were not words that were embraced by our community. And then here comes Hedwig with these amazing wigs, these fantastic vintage, thrifted, sequined rock star clothes, and being like, and if you want to dress weird and look like you're going clubbing at Tuesday, it was all okay. And I think that's what people in the trans LGBTQIA plus community, that we didn't even have that acronym then. I think that's what we latched to, that pride, even if Hedwig themselves didn't quite know where that pride was coming from. And I think what might make, it more iconic today is the ability to, again, look in yourself and find that non-gendered, not Hansel, not Hedwig, not Tommy, not her, but that core being, and pulling that forward is a very 2022 thing.
I agree, and I know you're the Rocky Horror Pooba. You're like the king/queen of Rocky Horror. Do you think Hedwig was brave and took a step further that Rocky Horror was too scared to go in terms of gender identity and gender bending?
I don't think it was a fear. I think that it was a language and cultural barrier. I think that both films in their own right took the limits that they had generationally at the time and pushed and pushed and pushed as far as they possibly could. Rocky started it with taking the binary, oh, girls dressed as boys, ooh, boys dressed as girls. And then Hedwig is like, oh, both at the same time, ooh, you know. And I think they're very similar in that aspect, but I think they are different in how they approached it.
I always have to bring it back to Rocky Horror when you're on the podcast because that's your thing. Tyler, what do you think? That's why I kept trying to not let you get too far on it because I wanted you to answer this question. But yeah, what do you think of that whole observation about Hansel being forced to become a woman, not something out of desire? I mean, would Hansel would have eventually become a woman, or would they stayed a male? It's a very contentious, sort of complicated question.
Mm.
But how do you relate that? I mean, what do you think about that question?
The way I take it and the way I interpret it, I believe Hansel would have stayed Hansel. I think I don't have too much new to add to what's already been said here, but yeah, like we said, it was a way to finally escape, you know, East Berlin, communist East Berlin, and get to this world that he'd been listening to on American Forces radio and watching on the TV. As far as, you know, Hedwig being a trans icon, like, you know, Harry was saying earlier, there's something in the story that everyone who watches this can relate to it in some way. And there's something you will relate to a certain character or whatever. So I think for Hedwig to be any sort of icon is great and important. And if they are a trans icon, that's great too. I think for me, I kind of gravitated to it more because also like Allie was just saying, just so the character's so out loud, does not care, which we see more so through the film is kind of this mask, you know, is this persona that they've have to take on. But still, you as the audience just watching the film, you kind of buy into that as well as the heads are that, you know, follow Hedwig around. I know for me it was, you know, being being a little gay boy in a small town in Tennessee and not really having, and you know, it I know what that feels like to be trapped like that. So again, that's just something else that each viewer can kind of bring something of their own to connect with. So that's what Hedwig was to me, just to be yourself, whatever that is, and just be out loud. And then, like you were saying, just the whole search of, you know, we're all in a way searching for that other half, you know. And then it comes, like we've already said at the end, but do we need another half or can we be whole? So I don't know. I'm getting on a tangent now because again, this film especially the film version, just raises so many questions and about your own self, really, which I think is wonderful. So anyway, I'm going to keep rambling if I don't stop now. So let me get that mute button here.
And the last two observations that I want you guys to talk about is, this is always a question I've always wanted to know, but we talked about, does Hedwig have a redemption arc in the end? What you think? Allie, before we started the podcast, Allie had a really interesting theory on what the ending means of Hedwig walking nude down the alleyway. Me personally, I think the ending is Hedwig Hedwig and Hansel leaving everything behind because Tommy has now had his karma. He's been exposed as being a fraud and a fake. Hedwig appeared on the Rosie O'Donnell show, which is fun because that's sort of that's actually a clip from when John Cameron and the cast appeared on Rosie. But Yitzhak gets there. Yitzhak gets, I guess, to become the person they want it to be, and then what is, I guess, Hansel / Hedwig is done. But yeah, that was my only. I just wanted to ask y'all's observation about what you think the ending represents. Allie, do you want to say what you said we were talking about earlier?
I can't remember if it was Harry or Tyler that talked about the rebirth at the end, walking nude. Was it Harry? But yeah, and I think it's a symbolism of the rebirth. Oh, is it okay? And he, there he is, naked as the day he was born, so to speak, going in between two. It's like he's being reborn into the world as this new character that is neither Hansel nor Hedwig nor Tommy, and is someone completely new, and on a level, someone completely changed, because even physically, his tattoo has changed. He's quite literally not the same person that started the journey. They are someone new. And so I think that the ending, the arc is, yes, finding yourself, but also finding someone different. Maybe finding that's not what you were looking for in the first place. They thought they were looking outside. Nope, honey, call's coming from inside the house. You know, you got to look inside you first. So I think that is their little redemption arc in a little way.
I love that metaphor. Harry, what do you think about the ending of Hedwig / Hansel, or Hedwig and Hansel walking down this alleyway naked?
I pretty much, totally agree. It's a beautifully symbolic moment. There's absolutely nothing except for who's underneath the costume now. I feel like obviously you can't. There has to be someone there to represent it, but if they couldn't, it would just be like a soul walking down the street, which sounds like cringe, but it's like there's nothing else except for who you are. None of this wig, none of this makeup, none of this outfit, whatever they thought made them, it's not their truth, which is, they gave that to Yitzhak. That's Yitzhak's truth now, which is, I cry every single time I see that, because again, watching the musical brings that bit to light. I first watched it and I was like, what? I'm a bit confused. Has Yitzhak, become Hedwig? But then it all becomes clear. It's very beautiful, very touching. That is a bit of a redemption in itself for me. The ending leaves me feeling quite sad on the surface, but I know that it's a good thing. I'm sad because it's silent until is it Origin of Love that plays, or Wicked Little Town? I think it's Origin of Love starts playing, but other than that, it's completely silent. Stumbling down the street, completely naked, new tattoo, new self, and it looks visually very sad, very melancholy. If you were to see that scene, on its own, you think this is a sad ending to a film. Within the context of the film, it's beautiful. It's a great ending. It's probably the best one you could have had, because if Hansel or Hedwig had stayed Hedwig, with the new fame and the new persona, the new outfits, being famous, they looked miserable. They wouldn't have been able to be who they truly wanted to be. So that's a very nice way to end it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Tyler?
Yeah, there's not really much I can add to that. Both of those, that's to me spot on. So, but yeah, I think exactly what Harry just said. That's why there's a redemption, because Hedwig still did not take the scandal and Tommy's, publicity downfall and and run with that to continue in something that where they weren't being true to themselves. And like you said, it's really interesting because, yeah, like you said, if you just look at that end shot, it does kind of look sad. Another way too, I mean, how else could you end the story though? But the thing that kills me is that every time, and it happened again today, I'm watching them walk down the street. I'm like, but I want to know what happens next. I mean, what is next? We've watched this whole story of Hansel going to Hedwig, and now it's somebody new that we don't really know. And, we never got a sequel, which I wouldn't want one. I mean, I say that kind of facetiously. I wouldn't want a sequel. But it's just gorgeous. I mean, And like I said, I can't really add anything, unfortunately, to this because Allie and Harry just said it so perfectly. So thank you.
That leads into the it's, of course, it's, with RKOCon and different Rocky Horror fans, and I think the legacy has Hedwig's become something new, and John Cameron Mitchell, of course, has been pressured to write a sequel. I'm glad there isn't, because he said the sequel will be very dark and very depressing, and I don't want a dark and depressing Hedwig story. I think it's because art imitates life sometimes, and I don't want anything sadder. I like the way it ends, that we're left with our own perception of what happens to Hansel and Hedwig. I don't want John Cameron Mitchell to write a sequel that is going to depress us. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me. I'm pretty sure Riverdale did an episode of Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I'm not sure. I know they did Carrie, but I think, yeah, I think it introduced a new generation to Hedwig, which is great. Which we're in a time, I think, of sexual fluidity and gender fluidity, and I think people are starting to come out of the box, and I think Hedwig really is being rediscovered as being sort of a manifesto of that gender expression and that gender fuckery and that gender just screw gender sort of thing, and I like that. There's a question that I have. I've always wanted to know what this means. When the origin of love, when there's something being graffitied on the wall and it says "Deny me and be doomed," I've always wondered what you think that means. And we're talking about the legacy, but someone is in the origin of love. Someone is graffitiing a word on the wall, and it says "Deny me and be doomed." And does that go to your sort of hypothesis that Hansel's been denying the other parts of himself while he was a male, and then when he's a female, denying the parts of himself that's male? Or I don't know. There's so much that Hansel doesn't have. I don't know. I don't know. Did anybody have any observations about that whole sentence to mind? Okay, Alex.
I always took it as to meaning if you were to deny your inner self, your true self, you would be dooming your own self. That's how I always took that scene. It didn't really go along with the story arc of being split into two, but it was an overall theme from the movie, and the animation just could have been slid in from any old place. But I always kind of took it as the don't deny what's in you, your own truth, so to speak.
This is a church service. Um, Amen. Gay men. Gay men. But yes, the legacy. What do you think about the legacy? What the life that Hedwig has now, and with TikTok and social media, I think a new generation is discovering Hedwig and making Hedwig what it should be, and making Hedwig transform into something else. Does anyone else have anything to say about the legacy of Hedwig and the Angry Inch and what it is now? 'Cause, yeah, Alex.
It's always me. So I know that when we performed it live at RKOCon, what was great was the director told us they didn't want just a screen accurate performance. They wanted a living, breathing rock concert performance. And I think that that's exactly what Hedwig needs to feel like. It is not just something to be performed, it's something to be experienced. And I think that's what part of the legacy that keeps it fresh for new generations and new groups of fans is that raw tonal quality from recording the songs live as they're filming is always going to be in the film. It's always going to be there. The film is never going to sound tired because nope, that really is them belting their faces off. And so I think that the just how how exuberant it is how it's going to stay alive, how glittery and glamoury and out loud it is.
It's out loud and proud. Tyler, what do you think the legacy of Hedwig is?
Well, yeah, definitely out loud and proud for sure. Yeah, I think that's just the power of it, and the fact that it is being referenced more, like we said, that like you said in Riverdale, that episode, and it had a pretty successful run finally on Broadway a few years ago, starting with Neil Patrick Harris. And Criterion, of course, put out a gorgeous transfer on Blu-ray. So I think the legacy is, I think it's, and this might come back to something you just said pretty recently. I mean, I think this may be the time that Hedwig finally has its, true audience. That, I mean, because it's 2022, I think more people can really connect with it. I think people will continue to connect with it even more. And like we've already said, there's something in there for everybody, no matter who you are. So I just hope, and may this podcast serve to spread the gospel even more. But yeah, I just hope more and more people, seriously, hope more and more people find out about it, because it's a really tragic story, but with a redemption, and it's just got a lot of heart to it, There, at the same time, you have this big bravado, the persona, the rock star, and then you see Hedwig, at the time on her own. I kind of just want, when it's Hedwig in Junction City and all that, I kind of, it's not great, and it's very humble. I mean, definitely her surroundings. So I don't know. It's just so complex, and it does have such a heart to it. And it does make you care about most of the characters. I think you can sympathize with most of them. I mean, we definitely do. We definitely do with Hedwig. We do with Yitzhak. I know I do with Phyllis Stein. To Tommy, a little bit. I don't really sympathize with Luther, though, because, yeah, fuck that guy. Anyway, I think we're all on the same page there. Yeah. Horrible. But no, I think that's the legacy, and that's what makes a cult film, or just any sort of art medium, that lasts. It's got catchy music, great cinematography, but it all boils down to the story. It all boils down to what you can instantly hook on, that you may not even realize, like, you're subconsciously connecting with. And again, it's just genius. And especially as a film, to be a successful film adaptation of their, like you said, basically one woman show, is a big triumph. I wish it would have been bigger at the time, but at least I think it's finally getting there now. I think anything that's in the Criterion collection, that definitely gives you a leg up too. So.
And Harry, I guess you're from the younger generation. What do you think about the legacy of Hedwig today?
Well, as you said, the legacy is definitely being carried. It's almost like the baton's being passed on, in a way. It's a beautiful thing to witness. Like, one of the examples that I saw that's probably, I don't know if it's more or less popular than Riverdale, because it's a more British show aimed at, sort of teens, young adults, that sort of. It might be more or less popular than Riverdale. I don't know. It's called Sex Education. It's very big in the UK, especially. They did an episode where, a gay boy and his best mate go and see Hedwig for his birthday, and it's just a very nice thing to see reference. It comes back in another episode there at the prom. Origin of Love plays, and they're like, oh, this is our song. And it's nice to see sort of that mixing of, you don't have to be LGBTQ to relate to the music or to enjoy it. And the beautiful thing is they go dressed up. You've got, this dead straight boy gone dressed in a wig, denim jacket and skirt, out in heels with his best friend. It's a very beautiful thing to see. I really sort of connected with that. I think that might have come out after I watched Hedwig for the first time, or if I watched it before, I didn't even realize. It was a really nice thing to see sort of referenced in a context that I would never have expected it to be in. I really liked that. So I think the legacy is definitely being carried on. It's obviously, as I said earlier, Davina De Campo recently in Leeds playing Hedwig. You've got all types of people playing Hedwig, which is wonderful, because it really connects to the story, that Hedwig is so many people at once. And, I just love to see it. I don't have much else to say, really.
It is. It's. I think Hedwig is so underappreciated, but I think it's getting there. Like with Rocky Horror and Shock Treatment, and I think Hedwig stands on its own, and I think it's much more grounded in reality. Yeah, I think it's just Hedwig could definitely take place now with the Ukraine, with everything going on. I mean, there's always some. It's. I mean, it's sort of like it's scary how history repeats itself. And how there's little Hedwigs everywhere. I actually connected more with Tommy Gnosis because he grew up in a small little town. And my favorite line in the movie is when he's like, she tells him she's transgender, and he goes, "Have you accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior?" And her response is, and it's a beautiful response actually, where she's like, "No, but I love his work." And I think that's actually quite profound. Yeah, I love that. Do y'all want to leave this episode on any notes? Anything y'all want to say? Anything you want to just throw out there about Hedwig? Deny Hedwig and be doomed. Yes, Tyler?
I just want to remind everyone, yeah, that. And you don't put a bra in a dryer, it warps. Okay? So that was my favorite line I decided today for watching. I had to sneak that in there.
Well, since we're on that, I love the Jesus quote. The bra one is hilarious, which I didn't know anything about bras. Allie, do you have a favorite quote?
When people think of big openings, a lot of people think of me.
The audience are so confused. And the drummer just goes, bunch. Harry?
My mother made my tits out of clay.
I love it. I just, it's so quotable. Well, thank y'all so much for being on this episode, and I can't wait for y'all to see it and for y'all to be a guest on the next episode.